Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news. F1 boss Stefano Domenicali has made many suggestions over the last few weeks as to how to make Formula 1 better, at least in his opinion. Some of these include ideas such as sprint races almost every weekend, points for practice, even reverse grids being considered. Max Verstappen, the reigning drivers' world champion, has given his perspective on this and said, look, he doesn't like sprint races at all, he thinks they should go entirely, and definitely disagrees with the direction that F1 seem to be taking. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy, subscribe if you are new as always, I would greatly appreciate it, really helps out the channel. Thank you very much indeed for doing that one. This is one example of the direction F1 is going. We see of course tracks like Spa on the chopping block to get removed, Paul Riccardo is going to go for next year, but yet circuits like, of course Las Vegas, we've got many street circuits now, Saudi Arabia as one example, right, from let's just say the money perspective, are arriving all over the place, and even apparently there's a London street circuit maybe being considered from 2025 onwards. Yes, money talks and whatever, but we can see the direction that F1 is taking, maybe away from traditional circuits, more towards where the money is, even if, these street circuits where the racing is not anywhere near as good as it would be around a circuit like a Silverstone or a Spa, or even just, tailor-made circuits like Hungary and, even Zandvoort delivered, for example, this season. Now, the F1 CEO has made many suggestions on how to make the weekends more entertaining. He wants better numbers over all 3 days. People right now watch the qualifying and they watch the race. Okay, fair enough. No one really watches the practice, at least like the hardcore people watch the practice, and I think it's pretty entertaining. But he's thinking, look, we want more numbers on the Friday, and that's partly why a lot of sports lately, MotoGP for example, and also Formula 1 are introducing sprint races, such that Friday is qualifying, Saturday is the sprint race, and then Sunday is the actual proper race. You get better viewership over the 3 days. It's understandable. Does it actually benefit the racing? Does it benefit the viewing experience? I'm not convinced it does, but he's come up with some pretty wacky ideas to actually make it work, such as having reverse grids for the sprint races, which I think all the drivers probably would vehemently disagree with, but who knows if they're going to approve this regardless. He reckons that they've got an obligation to try this stuff, so to what extent they will remains to be seen. So of course, this season we have 3 sprint races, 2 of which we've already had, one back at Imola at the start of the year, one it was Austria, right, and then I think we've got one in Brazil. I'm guessing it's in Brazil, just like it was last year. Same pretty much situation as what happened last time out. Now, I believe there were rumours that next year they were going to try and do 6 sprint races instead of 3. The teams, I think, shut that down, so there's only 3 next year, but they really do want to wrap these up, right? They did some sort of poll here from F1 Broadcasting saying, like, basically asking people, how important would you say the following principles are to improving the format of F1 sprint races? Not saying, like, do you want us to remove them, right? That's not an option here. They say to be shorter standalone races, not related to defining positions on the starting grid, to allow teams to develop more differentiated strategies. That's one of the criticisms, that like there's no strategy involved in sprint races, it's just one tyre compound to the end, to give smaller teams a better chance to win or compete for the win, i.e. we're talking reverse grid basically is what we're saying here, to provide the opportunity for reserve or younger drivers to compete, or to be an intro product to the world of F1 for new fans. This is another thing that Stefano Domenicali has talked about, that he wants it to be like for newer fans coming in from Drive to Survive and stuff, he wants it to be like a really easy to understand exactly what's going on, and that's why like the lack of strategy is actually quite appealing, because it means that you don't have to think about pit stops and stuff if you're a newer fan. Let's just say as an example. So that's what F1 are trying to do. Now, the drivers generally aren't so happy about this. Sprint races aren't, like, I don't think a lot of fans are a massive fan of sprint races in general, and also the drivers most certainly aren't. And Max Verstappen was asked about the possibility, right, because if Stefano Domenicali got his way, we would probably have Fridays where there would be practice sessions, maybe 2 practice sessions, and at the end of each session, there would be like a qualifying sim run where there are points awarded for the drivers after those practice sessions based on their performances there. Then maybe that would seed into the sprint race on Saturday, where there would be a reverse grid sprint race where Nicholas Latifi and the boys would start up front, Verstappen and co would start at the back. They've got 20 odd laps to try and change around the order. Then I guess the race either starts in that position or it starts in the initial quali position, and the sprint race is just for show effectively. And it's all a bit of a mess and takes away, in my opinion, from the competitiveness of the sport, and honestly like the intrigue of the sport to some degree. If you're just making gimmicky things to try and make it more entertaining, that takes away from the sport and the product, at least in my opinion. The drivers probably agree with this, maybe the F1 CEO disagrees, but this is what Max Verstappen says, right? Because of course, if they were to do this kind of, quali or like points in practice, then a sprint race, then a race, then they would have to do sprint races every weekend. And Verstappen has actually like vehemently denied that he wants to do this. He said, look, I would not enjoy it, and I just don't like it. So not only only does he not like it, but he just hates doing them effectively. That Sunday emotion and feeling should be special. That's the only time you race. That's how I grew up racing anyway. Sunday is the day to race, saying that you've got one race day, that's when everything is given out, and then, the Saturday, the sprint races are very different, like they really shouldn't be there. Of course, there's split opinions on these, right? They do give an additional day of content to watch, but personally, I think they make things less interesting, and Verstappen seems inclined to agree, because he says that, look, no one really wants to take any risks in the sprint races. If you go for a move that may or may not be there, if you go for it in the sprint race and you fail to execute that move, then you ruin your race for Sunday. You crash out, you start from the back on Sunday, you've ruined your entire weekend. You can't really afford to take the risk. And Verstappen says, look, not much has changed drastically in terms of results. The only thing that often does change is drivers in faster cars that are further back in the field make the moves to put them in the qualifying positions where their cars probably should be. Like from back in, I think Imola, for example, there was an interesting qualifying session, and then I think it was like Sainz and Perez were further back in the grid. By the time it got to the end of the sprint race, they were right back where they should be. So sometimes you get interesting quali sessions where maybe it's wet or it's drying up, and some drivers get out of position because they don't get a lap in the best conditions or whatever. They start out of position, you do a sprint race, and now it resets the order to where it should be, actually making the Sunday's race far less entertaining, arguably, than it could have been. I suppose if you do reverse grid sprint races, it gets rid of that whole idea, but I mean, I don't like that idea in the first place, to be honest. And even as Verstappen says, more or less everyone starts on the same tyre, and that's where you finish because you're scared to have a crash or whatever, because then you start at the back for the main race where the actual points are, really. There's some points for sprint races, but you know what he means. So everyone is a bit more like, okay, let's just make sure we finish the race without any trouble, and that's not what you really want. He says, look, they're not even entertaining these sprint races because no driver wants to take any risks, because obviously, for Sunday, that's important. So maybe the solution is to a reverse grid sprint race on Saturday for points, but also just make it so that it doesn't affect qualifying order for Sunday. And I mean, I don't know. I think that takes away from the experience, and Verstappen obviously doesn't like it either. And I also think that if you win the sprint race, but yet all the fast cars start at the back of the grid and weren't quite able to get you at the end of the 20 laps, like, doesn't that not feel like a hollow victory, right? If you're someone like, even like a Bottas, right? He starts in his Alfa Romeo in P15, wins the sprint, he actually ends up P5 or whatever, right? Overtakes the Williams, wins the sprint race before Verstappen can catch him up, then it's like, does that not feel like a hollow victory because you've won not really on merit? Bottas has also given his thoughts on this, right? He actually went on to say that what he reckons they should do is just a 2-day weekend, saying that, look, if they do want to cut down on practice, then just do a 2-day weekend. And as he also says, I don't think we need sprints every weekend, just less practice, more action. At the moment, I would say, sprint or no sprint. I would say sprint because we immediately get into the action on the Friday. But I think from his perspective, he's like, look, less practice, less waiting around, like let's just get into the actual race. But he's still not a big fan of actually doing the sprint races. So intrigue to your thoughts in the comment section below, really. Does Verstappen have a point? The drivers are generally going to be on Verstappen's side, I think. A lot of the kind of more hardcore fans are going to be on that side as well. For maybe the newer fans and for Formula 1 trying to grow, they have a different idea. But is sprint races every weekend actually a good idea? Definitely intrigue to your thoughts in the comment section below. One thing just to close out the video, actually, because after last weekend's, Lando Norris moved up one place in terms of most points ever without a victory. Of course, Nick Heidfeld still kind of leads this number in terms of the current point system. Brundle is here, Hulkenberg, of course, and well, now Grosjean is about to be overtaken probably by Norris over the coming races as well. So yeah, Lando, I don't know, man. He's been so close to a victory. It's certainly not going to happen in this year's McLaren. I wonder if he's got a pretty long-term deal, but he's certainly a driver capable of at least winning races, if not challenging for world championships in the correct machinery. So hoping that Norris's kind of luck improves over the future years, but McLaren need to really make a good car for next season if they want that to happen, kind of like they had in 2021. Very much intrigued to your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you are new, take care, and I'll see you next time.